Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. I'm trying to figure out my light. I'd like to begin today's talk with a quote that I found just recently, interestingly from Doris Orm. And I never realized she had written a book. God Tells New Things to Doris, 50 Revelations from God. As many of you know, Doris was one of the very first members of our church in America who had actually, when she met our movement, she was married and had a child, and she gave that up to follow wholeheartedly. I was very moved by this quote that I'm about to read. And this is how she actually opens her book. All births are of supreme importance for both mother and child. It is a moment of magic and labor, requiring absolute effort and cooperation, physically and spiritually. The miracle of birth heralds a new day for mankind, as each generation carries the hope of the living God to establish his kingdom of love on earth. Each soul and spirit has arrived in human form from the original source, the living God. It is born with hope and carries forward the hope of mankind. To be honest, I struggled to put this sermon together. It's hard to talk about women or mothers, which is most appropriate on this day, because I know that I myself have so many shortcomings as a mother. And sometimes my kids even joke that I'm actually the dad of the family, because sometimes I'm a little more stern than my husband. But so as I prayed and I was bringing things together to share with you, everything seemed kind of heavy, all of my experiences. And so I really hesitated. God, do you want me to actually say these things? I should be uplifting people today. But I realized history is sorrowful and suffering, and the role of mothers has been throughout history. Fortunately, we stand on True Mother's victory, which opens a whole new age for women. And I would like to share an experience with you that I had during the 50-day leaders workshop in Chungpyeong in December 2002. And I actually hesitate to share this because I don't want it to be misunderstood. But this experience helped me understand something very deep about Mother, which I had not grasped before. And I know Mother really, until very recently, had been an enigma. She was just the quiet, faithful person at Father's side, or when Father sent her out, faithfully and quietly fulfilling her role. Just looking like being a queen was so easy. But I understood this more deeply after my experience in Chungpyeong. So we were about 10 days or so into the workshop, and I began to have these odd experiences. And these were horrible experiences, and these were where women were being very mean and cruel. And in the span of about 3 days, I had 4 really terrible experiences. And these were all being enacted by people of one particular race. And I'm not saying that for any reason other than just to explain that God knows my thinking. And if it had just been like random, it wouldn't have struck me, but because it was coming from one particular area, then my thinking was, oh, it must mean something. So I think that's why God had to, give me that experience in that way. So I finally walked away after the 4th experience. It was the Ute game. And someone had spit on me because she didn't want to play Ute with an American woman. Because we obviously don't know how to play Ute, right? And, I was leaving. Bishop Kim tried to get me to stay, and some of the other ministers tried to encourage me to stay. And I said, no, I've had it. I'm not staying. Because I had to figure it out. So I began walking up the mountain in prayer. And I was just saying, okay, God, what is going on? This isn't normal. Why am I experiencing this? What does it mean? And so as I prayed and I just asked this very simple question, you know how God can speak to you sometimes very powerfully? It just fills you, the words and the knowing and the understanding. And God said, now you can understand Mother. We've heard many times that Father told us how difficult he was to train Mother. He was hard on her. But it wasn't just Father who was difficult on Mother. It was the women of the early church. Many of them expected and desired to have that position of Father's bride. And yet some little whippersnapper came in who hadn't even been seen by many of them. It brought out so much, I think, historical resentment, and Mother endured it. But what I understood as I walked up that mountain, that Mother didn't just have to endure. That wouldn't have been the victory. Endurance and perseverance alone are not a victory. Mother had to love those who tormented her. That was Mother's victory. Beyond endurance, she loved them. And I tell you, when I was going through that experience, I was not loving them. I was about ready to punch them out, and thank God for some other calmer sisters who pulled me away. I mean, seriously. But I realized Mother just maintained her dignity and her love. She's maintained that throughout her life. So I understood this quiet lesson from Mother, and it is really required of all true women to become the embodiment and love and grace through all circumstances. And I'd like to share a poem that always makes me think of Mother. This was actually a poem called The Mother by Padraig Pearse, who was an Irish rebel. He was actually killed by the English when Ireland was trying to become independent of them. And I first became familiar with this in the 1960s because Rose Kennedy read this poem after the assassination of her second son within 5 years. And so whenever I hear this, I think of Mother. And when I think of Mother, I think of this poem. I do not grudge them, Lord, I do not grudge. My 2 strong sons that I have seen go out to break their strength and die. They and a few, in bloody protest for a glorious thing. They shall be spoken of among their people. The generations shall remember them and call them blessed. But I will speak their names to my own heart in the long nights, the little names that were familiar once round my dead hearth. Lord, thou art hard on mothers. We suffer in their coming and their going. And though I grudge them not, I weary of the long sorrow. And yet I have my joy. My sons were faithful, and they fought. I think we really cannot grasp the depth of what Mother has been through. She's the substantial essence of God's femininity. And while we can stand on her foundation, we can't just ride on her coattails. We have to have our own victory as women, as mothers, our victory of utmost grace and love. And if you think of Mother, she's 73 years old. She looks fantastic, right? Yes. Because she has been able to live with dignity, digest with dignity, and always stand steadfast in love. So that is my goal, though I know I fall very short very many times, but it must be all of our goal. And I have several other experiences I'd like to share with you. I'm not a theologian, I just share my own experiences. I was in Israel in December 2003. If you remember, right before Christmas, we crowned Jesus. And we were there 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time doing outreach and trying to bring people to this rally. So several days after arriving, I went to what's known as the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall, with one of our ACLC ministers and a Japanese sister. And you're probably all familiar with the wall, have either been there or seen pictures of it. It's a stone wall within the old city of Jerusalem, and it's a remnant of the wall surrounding the Second Temple. It's a Jewish holy site, second only to the Holy of Holies on the Temple Mount itself. So throughout the ages, this is where the Jews have gathered to pray. And in modern times, any Christians visiting Israel, Jerusalem, always go there to pray. So the wall is divided. On one side, the men pray. On the other side is where the women go to pray. So I went to the women's side, and I stepped forward and I touched the wall. And I suddenly began to experience the heaviness of the prayers that have been prayed throughout the centuries, especially those of the Jewish lineage. I just lost concept of time and space, and I was communicating with the spiritual world. I realized there'd been so much sorrow throughout history, but it was really the mothers who came to me at that time, and I felt such regret and sorrow that they held in their hearts due to their shortcomings and their failings. Many were there: Eve, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, and Elizabeth. And I felt the presence of each of them and the pain that remained in their hearts. I felt such a burden as they actually shared their confessions of mistakes they'd made, but not realized it until so much later. Remember, these women were not given a heads up. They didn't have a guidebook. They had to accomplish so much of providential importance without guidance. Could I comfort them or console them? I didn't know, but at least I could listen. And the most intense experience I had, which was truly eye-opening to me, was that of, who do you think feels the most intense of all the women in history? It was Elizabeth, the wife of Zechariah and the mother of John the Baptist. And I realized that if she had been able to accept the difficult course that she had been given, if she could have supported Mary and loved Jesus as her own, then her son John the Baptist, would have accepted Jesus and become his first and foremost disciple. The entire course of history would have been changed. It would have been different. I realized that is the power of the influence of mothers. And I realized at that moment how important a mother's role is. So I walked away that evening from the wall being truly humbled. And if you can take one more story, just a few days later, I had the opportunity to visit the tomb of Mary, Jesus' mother. And I'm sure some of you have been there, but you walk in, there's a little church or sanctuary built, go down the stairs, there's a crypt of Mary. I knelt there, and suddenly the tears flowed, and they would not stop. And everyone, many brothers and sisters or visitors came and left, and I was inconsolable. I just felt her anguish. I cried all the tears that she had to cry. And most of all, I understood then that she did everything she had to do. I believe that we are often very hard on Mary because we're looking in hindsight, 2020 vision of 2,000 years ago. Mary did everything she could. After all, she was a child who was asked to conceive the Son of God in a society which stoned an adulteress to death. She knew that she did not succeed as Jesus' mother, and she carried incredible pain. But she also felt an anguish that no one understood her heart. And Mary has been active on this earth for the past 2,000 years. As we know, there are so many holy sites attributed with her appearance. She's known as Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Laos. There's probably 12 or more places where she is known to come. And Catholics pray to her. She hears the prayers of the Catholics. And I admit I even still pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. When I can't go to sleep at night, I pray, Hail Mary. But that she is taking that on as her penance because she still feels that sorrow that she didn't fulfill. So from a practical perspective, we can easily understand the importance of a mother within the family. But there's a deeper sense for women to understand. I've given many talks to women and about women, but there's really quite a difference between a woman being a woman and being a mother. While women are wonderful beings, motherhood puts the finishing touches. It's like the icing on the cake. So as I worked on this sermon, on these things I wanted to share with you, I came to understand more deeply why Father teaches us that we must become parents, because it completes us. So I apologize for bringing so much heaviness to this sermon on this joyful Mother's Day. But we all know the mother's heart's very deep, yes, right? Yes. I have 6 children, and every time one of them left, whether they were going to STF, GPA, college, joining their spouse, I cried inconsolably. It's, the child is being torn apart. That is the depth of the mother's love. And how much every mother here knows how much you've suffered with your children, with every little scrape of the knee, with every little thing that they go through, and how much we want to heal and take care of everything. And one thing I did, which I just want to share, especially with the younger ladies who don't yet have children but will, every time my children stepped out of the house, I prayed. If they were just going to the school bus, I prayed. If they're just going next door to play with their friends, I prayed. That is our role, and we can't be with them every second. But through our prayer, they have great protection and guidance. So I actually am going to close. But the way I would like to close is I'd like to read a letter that a first-time mother wrote to her own mother. So these are the words of Kate Northrup. Kate is the daughter of Dr. Christiane Northrup. Kate's 35 years old and has an 8-month-old daughter. So as she became a mother, she began to understand her own mother. So I would just like to share these words because they moved me deeply. And I believe that every mother here has experienced these things. So from Kate to her mom. Mom, I thought this was going to be easier. I just didn't get it. Everyone, including you, told me this was going to be hard, but I had no idea. I heard women talking about how once they had kids, they could barely figure out how to shower, let alone string a sentence together or put on matching socks. I thought surely they were just disorganized. I figured I could handle it. I mean, I'm a successful entrepreneur with excellent organizational skills. I was so wrong, so very wrong. Mom, I just didn't know. I didn't realize how many diapers you've changed, that you've had my poop on your hands so many, many times. I didn't know the juggling act you performed every day. Work, kids, family, meals, money, repeat. I was completely unaware of what it took to keep all of us balls in the air. I didn't even know there were other balls. I felt like I was the only one. That's what an amazing juggler you are. I get it now, how your heart broke in a million pieces when you dropped me at daycare when I was 6 weeks old. That you made the hard decision to go back to work, and that if you'd decided to stay home, that would have been hard too. I get it now, that if you choose to leave your babe and go to work, or leave your work and stay with your babe, or even some combination of the two, it's hard, period. I left a daycare tour yesterday and broke down in tears before I even reached my car. Imagine dropping Priscilla off there feels like dropping off one of my organs, my heart specifically, somewhere, and then just leaving it for the day while strangers take care of it. But a million times worse. I had no idea how uncomfortable it would be, physically bringing a child into this world, but also emotionally and mentally and spiritually. Deeply uncomfortable on so many levels. I didn't know how out of control I would feel so much of the time. I get it now, why you didn't have the bandwidth to care much about the house when we were little. I get now that you have to make choices, and sometimes the choice is sanity over decluttering. I honor you for making that choice. I didn't get how all-consumingly loving a tiny person is. How my heart and my arms ache for her when I'm away. How I sometimes yearn to have my freedom back when I'm with her. How I feel really badly about that. Everyone tells you how hard it is, but you just don't get it until you do. I had no idea how much it took to raise tiny humans as close to well as you can muster. And I'm only 8 months in with one of them. I had no idea how little sleep I could function on. I had no idea that so many other people can too. I had no idea how precious time alone in a quiet house would be to me someday. Like worth thousands of dollars an hour precious. I had no idea how much life shrinks when you're tending to the needs of a little human. How the minutiae is my life. How boring and sacred it could be all at the same time. And most especially, I had no idea how much you loved me until I looked at my own baby girl and felt my heart expand big enough to contain several galaxies at least. To know that I'm as precious to you as this little baby girl is to me brings me to my knees in awe. We have all been that precious, innocent, purely lovable baby. We are all made of that same stuff. Thank you for the lullabies and the cuddles, for the sleepless nights and the back rubs. Thank you for always picking up the phone, no matter how late or early I called. Thank you for telling whoever needed to be told what was what when I was too young or scared to do it, and for encouraging me to tell them when it was time for me to do it. Thank you for coming to New York to scoop up the million pieces of my broken heart, and for listening to me detail Penelope's sleep dramas for the last 8 months as though it's interesting. Thank you for courageously doing the work you needed to do, despite me throwing myself at your feet and begging you to stay home. Thank you for showing me what it means to be a mother who loves her babies fiercely and who loves herself fiercely. Thank you for trusting me so I learned I could trust myself. Thank you for caring as deeply about me as I care about Penelope. I never knew I was cared for like that until I felt it for another. These are things we cannot get until it's time to get them. I'm so new at this mothering thing. I know I don't know much, but I do know that you've been doing it for 35 years, and I do know that you're doing a damn good job. I'm in awe. I do know that billions of women have and are doing it around the planet, and I'm in awe of them too. Mom, I just didn't have any idea before, but now I do. Thank you for loving me every second of every day of my life, even though I didn't have a clue how much that took. Baby P is sleeping in my arms as I write this. She doesn't have a clue that being her mother is the biggest gift and the biggest challenge of my life, nor should she. I will continue to love her with every fiber of my being, just as you've loved me. And one day, she may have some idea of what it takes, or she may not. I get it, that's not the point. The point is the loving, not the getting something back for it, but it never hurts to say thank you. So today and every day heretofore, I honor and thank you, Mom, for mothering me and for loving me in a way I didn't even know existed before I became a mother. I get it now. Love, your baby girl. Thank you, mothers. Please join me in prayer. Our beloved Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, Heavenly Parent, thank you for this great and incredible life you've given to us, that you've breathed into each one of us. Today we honor mothers, but we know how important as well the fathers are, for without them we would not be mothers, and without our children we would not be mothers. We're all connected, we're all flowing, we're all a part of you, and we pray that you can really dwell within each family unit, within each individual, within each couple, and that you can live and express fully through each one of us, that each of us can remove the barriers of doubt or fear or lack of confidence that holds you at bay, but instead that you can live and love through us as we seek to love one another and to love this world as you have taught us. Thank you for all the lessons. Thank you for the example of our true parents, our father and our mother. We thank you, we honor them, and we report this prayer as we offer together in the name of Steve and Mary Anglin, a Blessed Central family. Adieu.